All right. Hey, what's up, Yellowjackets fans? Pete here to spill the Yellowjackets tea with you about the most recent episode. This isn't actually even a teacup and a saucer. It's actually just a table. I'm in my daughter's bedroom, by the way. No one ever fucking comments about how weird it is that I'm in my daughter's bedroom. It's the only quiet place that I can talk with my good friend, Dr. Zayas God over there. You're
What's
in
up?
your bedroom too, right?
Yeah, except my bedroom looks like a fucking log cabin in the middle of the Canadian wilderness. So
Y-
yeah.
yes. I just always feel weird. I'm this 40-year-old man sitting on the floor, and there's like a pink bed behind me with posts. But we are going to talk about a show that has a lot of teenage girls, so maybe it's kind of appropriate. I don't know. Yellow Jackets season 2, episode 4 is entitled "Old Wounds." And Danny, I gotta say, when I started watching this episode, I was super tired, and I found myself almost dozing off. I that doesn't mean it was bad, but I kind of look at this episode as like nothing really stood out. Would you say the same for yourself?
I I actually got excited when I saw the title of the episode was called Old Wounds because I thought we were going to see a lot more stuff from 1996.
Yeah.
And you get some. There were a few moments that I really enjoyed and that I actually genuinely felt like for the characters. Uh, but I mean, to me, I wouldn't say that this episode dragged at all. To me, this was just a good episode in what is so far a good season. Nothing like, I don't think this is going to be anybody's favorite episode. I don't think this is going to be an episode we look back on like a Stranger Things season 2, episode 7, where we go, oh God, what the hell were they thinking?
Yeah.
Great show, but what was that one episode? I think this is just kind of a middle episode of a season. What is it, 10 episodes this season?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think so.
So I feel like this is a thing that it always happens where like the middle part of a season is, if there's any dragging, it's always that middle part of the season. You're always really excited for the show to come back. Usually, whatever show it is, the first episode of a second or third season typically doesn't live up to the hype. So that second and third episode are usually where you're like, oh shit, it's back,
Right,
yeah. And
right,
I think
right.
and I think that holds definitely so far with
Absolutely.
Yellowjackets season 2.
Yeah.
And now we're into like that middle section of episodes 4, 5, 6. And I'm sure by like the end of episode 7, we'll get into that like end of season arc that's going to like really make that the finale of the finality of this season feel like really special. My long way of saying no, I didn't think it dragged, but I also didn't think it was like a remarkable episode. I thought it was fine.
Okay. Um, when I did a little research for the episode, I read an article on Den of Geek, and it was written by Bernard Book, and he said the pace of the season is deliberate and well thought out, and I think that there's some truth to that. Um, for this show, there is there's definitely moments that are like kind of jaw dropping, oh my god moments, and this episode was sort of devoid of it. It was more along the lines of balancing between the supernatural aspect of the show and the kind of cynical real world aspect of the show. And like literally those two forces went head to head in this episode, right? In the form of Nat and Lottie.
Versus Lottie.
Yeah.
I also thought this episode had some good character building moments.
Yeah.
In particular, Shauna's family, Shauna, her daughter, and her husband Jeff. I thought that story kind of coming together as this like weird amalgam of secrets and lies, and what does everybody know? I thought that was really interesting, and I liked also the story involving. Oh, geez. Well, I just had it. What was the other story I really liked in this one? You mentioned Nat and Lottie. I like that.
Van?
The 1996 story. Oh, where Nat takes, what's her name? The girl she stabbed with the fork.
Oh yeah, I know. Fuck. Ah, god damn it.
I
We could just
really
say,
like I really liked that part where she takes her to like she takes the detour to her mom's, and there's that whole thing about the fish. I don't know why. I thought that was an interesting little sidetrack from like the core four. We do get to see some character returns and reveals in this episode, which I think is a very big deal. Uh, but again, they were done in kind of a just kind of like, oh, here they are kind of a way, not
yeah.
like in like a big, oh my god, I can't believe, moment.
Yeah, that's well put. I actually wasn't really that big a fan of the Nat in the present day story. Like I thought it was really weird that when she went to go take the goldfish, she didn't just like grab the whole tank and just walk out. Like she had to like keep the goldfish in her mouth and spit it out. It was fun to see Juliette Lewis spit out a goldfish and then like do something with her tongue. But I watched this with Sherry, and Sherry was just like, "Why is she always acting like she's still drunk?" Because I know like Nat has gone through AA and rehab or whatever, but she's supposed to be sober at this point, and Juliette Lewis kind of plays her off like she's kind of always wiggling around and being sarcastic, and um, I think that it's going to connect her to that girl that she stabbed with the fork, but I would say that like when it's her time and when it's Missy's time, I'm kind of checking out in the present day, and I'm all on board for the 1996 stuff with them, but the
Well,
present day stuff, yeah, go ahead.
well, I mean, I think if you're checking out of that, I think next week you're going to get your kind of reprieve because I
Okay.
think those two stories finally meet. In the here's what's coming up next week on Yellowjackets. We do get that reveal that Misty and Elijah Wood, I don't know his name, Missy
Yes.
and Elijah Wood, Missy and Elijah Wood like end up meeting up with Nat and Lottie's
Lottie.
camp. So those stories are going to converge. Thaisa also ends this with a convergence of sorts that I'm sure we'll spend most of next week getting into. I can't imagine that that's not the crux of next week's episode, the way this one ended. Uh, I don't have to spoil anything. She sees Van. She ends up, who, by the way, I want to go to Van's store. I don't know what it is. It looks like it's like a retro movie theater with a movie store in the front where
Yeah.
she rents VHS tapes. And I'm
Yeah.
like, take me to Van's store right now.
Yeah. What's the name of the actress that plays adult Van?
Is it Lauren Ambrose? Is it the one
Lauren
from Six
Ambrose.
Feet Under?
Yes. I am a big fan of Lauren Ambrose. I loved 6 Feet Under. Did you watch that show when it was on HBO?
So I didn't. I own the whole series on DVD. I've
Yeah.
not watched a single episode. But when I was in LA, we spent an entire day driving to like movie locations and TV locations.
Yeah.
And I have pictures of the 6 Feet Under house. I was like right outside the 6 Feet Under house. And my sister-in-law, who was a big fan of that show, was taking like a lot of pictures. That was one of the reasons we ended up going there.
Yeah,
Uh,
she's great in that, and it's so funny because her career goes all the way back to the '80s to where she actually played Paul's little sister in David Lynch's Dune. So I'm like, oh my god, that's so cool! And now she's in this show, so she's in a lot of things that I really love. I, as far as I remember for this episode, there really wasn't much besides Thaisa finding her. Like this episode was Thaisa essentially like picking up the pieces and following the track to see what her other had been doing, and her other essentially had driven her all the way to the highway and like just ran out of gas at one point, to where Thaisa had to hitchhike, and it seems like the other is bringing her directly to Van. And that kind of mirrors what's going on in the past, too, because Thaisa's other is guiding teenage Van around, too. And I really liked the touch where essentially there are all these different trees in the forest around the cabin and that there's a pattern. And Van went ahead and made a detailed map of the forest, and it showed that that symbol it essentially connects all these trees in the forest. I think that's pretty crazy. What do you think of that?
I thought it was. I do think it's interesting how every one of these like teenage girls is really good at cartography. I think that's very interesting. But I
Yeah,
guess if I was stuck somewhere for at this point, it's almost a year. Like
yeah,
it's got to be close to. It's like 8 months probably at this point.
right.
Because Shauna obviously is uh, on the verge of giving birth soon. So if I was someplace for 7 to 8 months, then yeah, I probably would have the way of the land a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I always think about how bored they must be. I see them sometimes like playing cards, and now like Misty's going, or I keep saying fucking Misty too, like she's from fucking Pokemon. Missy is like singing show tunes with like her new BFF back in the day. Yeah, I always think about how bored they must be. But yeah, that whole aspect, we usually save Taisa for the end because Taisa's stuff is so exciting. But really, in this episode, it was just like she just was going from point A to point B, and that is kind of matching what she was doing in the past. In the past she was working with Van. In the present day, she's trying to get to Van. So, what do you think the fucking symbol means?
I have no idea, and I'm kind of glad that I. It's one of those things where I brought up the term, and then you kind of fell in love with that idea of like fantasy booking this stuff. It's
Hell yeah.
I don't have a real good answer in my mind, so I'm really just open to anything the show is going to give me.
Yes.
I'm glad I don't have anything concrete where I'm like, oh, I know what it is. It's a Native American symbol, or it's a Wiccan symbol of the dead, or whatever. Because if it turns out to not be that, like we end up getting inside our own heads, and then we end up getting disappointed because a show didn't live up to our expectations. And I don't really have an answer. Like it's been a present symbol since like the first episode of season 1. And it looks like, a circle on top of a triangle, but then there also it looks like it could be an animal of sorts where it's like the head, the body, and then there's kind of like tails and like either feet or a tail at the end. So who knows? I don't know. What is, and if it is an animal, what does that even have to do with anything in this series? It's very strange. We have this imagery with antlers, from the very first episode of when they're dressed up in their outfits. And then we have that with the deer with the molting antlers. And then last episode we had a renegade moose, and now we have another moose in this episode, in a scene that I thought was my favorite scene in the whole episode. Actually, this week was the scene where they're trying to dig the moose out of the lake, and just the Sophie Thatcher is friggin' great on this show. She's young Nat, and she kills it for me in this episode. Like you really feel like her losing that moose.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's not just that was like, I thought, and I like Juliette Lewis a lot, but I thought she did such a great job of like conveying the emotion there, and then like sitting in that bathtub like alone, trying to regain probably the feeling in her face and her arms because they were in the ice water. Just such a great moment. I do really like the 1996 stuff. I think a lot. I don't want to say a lot more, but more than the present day stuff.
Yeah.
It's, and in that respect, I again make kind of a comparison to Lost. It's very compelling when they're on the island, and then it's like you hear that dun, 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 and now all of a sudden I'm watching John Locke roll around in his wheelchair and have arguments with people, and Saeed in the military torturing someone. It's like, okay, like get back on the fucking island.
Yeah. Well, that was the most interesting part of the episode. It ended up with what you were saying, with the elk being underneath the water, and Sophie Thatcher like really just defeated when it went under the water, as young Nat. But the main focus of this episode was Nat going up against Lottie, and then them deciding, okay, well, who's going to actually get the food that we need? Who's going to be the one that is the provider? And you can see there's a clear division among the Yellowjackets team as to who is on Lottie's side and who at least is skeptical like Nat. Like maybe they're not on Nat's side, but they don't believe in Lottie's mysticism. I think they actually, one of the terms they used was Wiccan bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Lottie's Wiccan bullshit. And so
what's even interesting there is they kind of give, and with Lottie in the past and in the future, there's been times where she's kind of had this like air of, I know what I can do, I have these powers, but then she also is obviously very scared of what is happening to her. And
yes.
This competition is not like Lottie versus Nat. It's more of like what you were saying. It's the people who believe in Lottie are like, she'll find the food for us. And she's like, wait, what? I will? Yeah. And the people who don't believe in Lottie's Wiccan bullshit are like, fuck you, Nat'll find the food with her gun. And she's like, wait, what? Like, I've been doing that. Like, I don't need to compete with anybody.
Right.
And like, they're not really at like butting heads with each other. It's more of the Yellowjackets themselves kind of splitting into these two factions.
Yeah.
And I just keep thinking about like that, the way this series opened, literally the first moment of the first episode where you have that girl running in the woods alone and she falls into a trap to become the next meal. And everybody else appears to be on this, like, dressed in, the skins and hides of animals. And, it's just very freaky and horror movie-esque. And you're like, what does it take to get from where we are here to get to there?
Yeah. And it seems like there are forces that are making them starve, right? Because they could have gotten that elk out of the water, but it goes under the water, right? And then when she makes the symbol, that's when all the birds hit the house, or like hit the wall or something above the house. And that's where they had all those birds to eat at the beginning of this episode. Like there's something that's like directly influencing whether they can have food or not have food. Like it's a force. And two things to go along with what you were just saying. You mentioned how Lottie herself can sometimes be scared of her visions, or she doesn't completely believe, like she doesn't necessarily believe in herself, but she gives some validity to these visions. And in the modern day, they had this one scene I completely forgot about where she meets with her counselor and she talks about like upping her drugs essentially so she'll stop having visions. So she's like scared of her visions. And the end result for Nat was that they try to get the elk out of the water. But for Lottie, what ends up happening is she walks off into the woods. She finds the shrine that they had in the previous season before the winter fell. That little shrine they made where they put like the elk's heart on it, or it was maybe a bear's heart, I think.
Yeah.
And she ends up cutting her hand to do like a little sacrifice. Then she has this vision, and that's where we got the fucking hatch. Remember we were talking last week about like there was gonna be a hatch like Lost. I was not expecting her to sort of go into a mall that plays the Yellowjackets theme. Was that kind of surprising to you too?
That was a very kind of weird departure, like a dream sequence where they go from like eating in a food court to then they're like eating like flesh and like meat in the food court.
Yeah.
I like, again, you mentioned in our first review of this season that apparently the creators have a path. So I'll have faith in them. If I didn't know that, if I thought they were flying episode by episode or season by season, stuff like that would be a little worrisome for me.
Yeah. I was really happy to see Laura Lee, and like Laura Lee is
Yeah,
clearly in a lot of Lottie's visions, right? She's in adult Lottie's visions. She's in the vision that she had in this episode. In this episode, she literally helps Lottie, right? Because she's like, "Hey, if you don't get up, you're gonna freeze to death," and so she helps move Lottie. I feel like Laura Lee is sort of like maybe Lottie's conscience, or she's like this force for good in Lottie's mind, you know. Um, and then there was like a little bit of bonding between Lottie and Nat at the very end of the episode, where they both had to heat up in that tub, and then they're both. I think they say to each other, "Good game," right? Like as if they were playing soccer. It was a
yeah.
nice little touch, yeah. Um, so we covered Lottie, Nat, and Thaisa. We got to make sure that we cover Shauna too. What did you think about that sequence where she talked to her daughter in the middle of nowhere?
If I were her daughter at that point, I would have just thought my mother was trying to kill me.
I actually worried for a moment that she was going to actually kill her own daughter.
And like I said, I thought it was an interesting scene. I kind of liked the three of them just kind of in the kitchen, like, okay, what can I do to help? Oh yeah, by the way, I was out drinking in a park with friends, even though I think we're supposed to assume that the friend she's been speaking to is the cop. So
That's what I would
that's like
assume.
the secret that she's going to tell them next week is like, oh, by the way, I have been talking to somebody, and before you swore me to secrecy, I told all your secrets to a guy
Yeah.
who whoops was a cop. So I don't know if Shauna's done killing people. But yeah, I think it's very strange. You have the husband who was, getting himself involved with the wrong people, who ends up having to blackmail his wife and her friends. You have the wife who thinks her husband is having an affair, so she goes off and has an affair, ends up killing the guy. The two of them end up covering it up, and now the daughter who like during the affair ends up bumping. Could you like imagine how awkward that must be if you like bumped into if you were like out as a teenager and you bumped into one of your parents like on a date with somebody else, or like, yeah, like I actually feel for the daughter here. Like she's going
Yeah.
through like a very strange situation, and I just feel like this episode, like what you were saying with the dream sequence and or the hatch sequence and everything else, and these kinds of things with the daughter. When you have a show that is based around, the show has great characters, but the show is also, about the plot points,
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
What happened, what's happening in the woods, what caused the fire to go out, what causes them to become cannibals, who's right, Lottie or Nat. I'm always afraid when they start adding more things that they will end up not going back and answering, because I got to be honest, like if and I said this to you in another review that we did, if it turns out that Adam was just a random guy who got into a random car accident with a random woman,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he took up that much screen time in season 1, and it turns out he serves no greater purpose than being that random guy who gets randomly killed, I don't think that's good enough.
Agreed.
And the other major plot point through all of season 1 was the whole blackmail thing, and it turns out to be Jeff, which isn't that great. It's fine. Like I feel like they have such good setups, and so far the few questions that they've answered, I haven't really been excited about the answers, and that kind of concerns me for some of the bigger questions that we're going to have, like what is the symbol, uh you know oh, it turns out the people living here like geometry, and they drew a circle on top of a triangle, and they were really in a math cult, and
Yeah.
like
Wait, isn't that fucking? That's something in the dirt, right?
oh god,
It's a math cult, right? Yeah, yeah. No, but you know what? Danny, I think like the clearest example of this is when, what's his face? When they find out how what's his face fucking died. Javi's older brother.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. What the fuck's his
Javi,
name?
with a T.
Tyrone.
No,
What the fuck is his name? Oh my god, I gotta look this shit up. This is bad. By the way, people, if you're listening or watching this, I was just at the Ghoulish Book Festival all weekend. I just came home like 10 minutes before we started recording, and I'm recording with Danny, so my brain is a little fried.
yeah, and I watched this episode Friday morning actually on Paramount Plus, and now we're recording this on Sunday.
Yeah.
And I've been in a
Travis.
Of course, Travis.
Yeah.
I've been in a never-ending well of full moon features this weekend. I watched
nice.
Dollman. I watched Demonic Toys, Dollman, and Dollman versus Demonic Toys all over the last 2 days.
Oh man!
All to prep for Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys. This shirt, by the way, is a Terror Threads. You can go to terrorthreads.com. Really, I got a bunch of cool shirts from them. I've been down a well. So yes, we got Travis. Yeah, so but to get back onto Yellowjackets, yes, I agree with you. Like a monster part of season 1 into season 2 was, how did Travis die?
Right.
Was it suicide? Was it supernatural? And I guess it's kind of a little of both.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like I thought it was an interesting reveal, but it also kind of doesn't really answer anything. It just kind of continues a story that we already had going.
Right. And so to kind of take that back to Shauna, I wonder if the purpose of Shauna's modern day story arc is to be like, she has this family, she's been pretending to be one type of person, and her whole arc right now is getting her family to accept her for who she is. That might be it. And some shows, that's the whole duration of a TV show, is like, will the family accept me for who I am? You know, Tony Soprano's a mobster. His family kind of knows about it, but they don't accept it. You know, Walter White is a meth creator or whatever. Does his family know about it? Is his wife against it? Right. In this show, it's like she survived this plane crash and they resorted to cannibalism. You know, can her family accept the truth? And one question that came up with me and Sherry, we actually like the stuff with Jeff and Shauna because he is very supportive of her, right? Like, she's done some crazy things and he basically accepts it. And I mean, he blackmailed her too, but he's just extremely supportive of her and loving to her, and he's like sticks up for her. I stuck up for her to Jackie's family in last season. But Sherry was asking me, she was like, do you think that Jeff knows all the details about the 1996?
Well, he read her journals.
That's a good point. But
that's actually something that I forgot about, that somebody left in the comments of our last review, because I was saying that I felt bad for Jeff because, you know, he's kind of more of a screw up than a bad guy. And somebody was like, well, he does read her journals and uses that information to blackmail them. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, he did do that shit.
Someone went crazy.
Here's a question. Here's a question that I think of a lot while I'm watching this show.
Yeah.
As absolutely awful as eating your teammates is, if they would have come home after 19 months and been like, we all thought we were going to die, we did what we had to do to survive, and they would have told that story, leaving out maybe the supernatural stuff, you know, unless they're, again, I'm saying this, there's probably stuff we haven't seen. There's probably, you know, something that swears them all to secrecy that we'll find out about at some point. But like, I think the world would be forgiving of a girl's high school soccer team that crashed in the wilderness and was lost for nearly 2 years and had to like resort to anything to survive. Like, I don't feel like they would have been like, oh, you know, you ate your teammates. Oh, sorry, we're gonna have to arrest you for murder now. I don't think that would have happened. Like, I think I don't know. I feel like the way, like, people have to kind of suspect stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
like, like the movie Alive exists. Like that movie came out in the early 90s. So that's a true story that happened. And like that's like an accepted reality of like you crash in the woods, like you do what you need to do. Like I'm not saying like murder is fine, but
Right.
you know, if it's live or die, to quote Saw, you make your choice.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, like, in the very first episode, the first scene, they show that actual murder's involved, and that's the part where they kind of draw the
Yeah.
line, right? Yeah, I do think that they would
Like
accept
they
it.
don't have to say all the details.
Right, right, right.
And
Speaking of the,
also, not only do they not have to tell the details, but they could just fucking lie about everything. They could be like, we were the only ones who survived the crash, and we lived off of we lived off of our teammates because that was the only food we had. And who's going to like check that they were there almost 2 years?
yeah, yeah, really good point. Really good point. By the way, with the comments, I did see that one person. I forgot her name, but she did comment a lot, and we really appreciate that. Like that reminds me when me and Sherry covered season one, like having that ongoing dialogue. And I know I was kind of busy this week with like the Ghoulish Festival coming up, and I was actually doing some writing myself too. But I'll make sure I write back to your comments too. And I know that Danny does a really good job responding to y'all's comments too. But as far as the bigger mysteries and stuff, uh, you know, we also don't know what's up with Elijah Wood's character too, right? I forgot to cover this too. Like him and Misty, it seems like he just literally wants to be with Misty, and he wants like a companion like her. He even like compared himself to Moriarty and said that she was Sherlock in the previous episode.
He also tries to. He also, when they go to the Airbnb, tries to get one bedroom, and she's like, "No, two."
Yeah, right, right. But it's funny because he explains how he is wealthy and he's able to not work, and he was involved in an accident that involved him having to get a metal plate. That seemed very suspect, and I just wonder. The point I'm trying to make is: are there people that do know the truth about the Yellowjackets, and then what are they going to do with that knowledge? And is he one of them? You know?
I don't know. I felt the same way about Javi, like just coming back in, and he walks back in to the story after a couple years, a couple like months and months away.
Yeah,
We haven't seen him since the night of what was it, season 1, episode 7, I believe, or
yeah.
6, the
Doom coming.
yeah, the Doom Coming festival, and he runs off into the woods, and like, are we going to find out how this 14 year old kid was able to stay warm through a winter and eat and survive? He doesn't look like he's skin and bones. He looks like he's doing fine.
Yeah,
So, and obviously him being alive after Nat had lied about his death, and after Lottie had said he was alive, that's going to create a lot of tension probably over the next couple episodes too. So
yeah. Yeah. I totally forgot to mention the whole hobby thing too. Um, yeah, we'll see what ends up happening with him. I do think that everyone but Travis is fair game as far as like who's getting eaten. I was gonna say that just one last thing to kind of bring up too is that the coach. We have one more sequence where the coach is by himself and he has like a flash back to his old partner. I was under the impression that he is now at this point where he's just fantasizing about a life he could have had.
yeah,
Sherry thought that was a flashback, though. What do you think out of those two?
I think it's. I thought that was a flash, like kind of like a flash forward, because it talks about events as if like the crash doesn't happen, or or like an alternate reality where he quit his job to go live with this guy, and so maybe the plane crashed, maybe it didn't, but he wasn't on it, you know.
Yeah.
But
Just like
I don't think these visions that the coach is having, I don't think that they're realities.
right. Okay. Yeah, he's just delusional. A lot of people like on Twitter and stuff are like, yeah, he's next. The coach is gonna be the
Well,
next.
we said that too. We like
Yeah.
he just it just feels like once he made the decision to not partake in the uh, uh you know, what was the girl's name? Jenna?
Jackie.
Jackie. If it once he committed to not taking part in the Jackie feast, that he was pretty much uh putting a mark on him to be like, if not next, one of the next.
Yeah. And one other thing I wanted to point out was that when it comes to the characters that are kind of skeptical or cynical, it's essentially the main characters that are the focus of the show that are the cynical ones. So like Shauna, Thaisa, Nat, Misty's kind of like in between. But then the ones that are like on board with all of Lottie's Wiccan bullshit are all the kind of supporting characters that we don't really know the names of, or like the people that are like real.
There's that
dialogue.
one like pretty brunette girl who she like stands up a lot for Lottie, but
Yes.
she's also hearing a voice in the house.
She hears like a dripping sound, right?
Like a noise in the house. Then you have the other girl who found the mouse, and I thought that was an interesting scene because to me that was kind of like we have to get back to normal, and normal is like kids have pets and we want to take care of things. But I feel like they're going to find that mouse and they're going to be like, how come you didn't let us eat this mouse?
Yes.
You know, so, I mean, I think like there is still a good number of Yellowjackets we don't really know anything of other than they're there. And I think that is most likely the fodder that is going to be coming.
Yeah. But don't you think it's interesting that the fodder are the ones that kind of believe Lottie's Wiccan bullshit?
Yeah.
I think that's real interesting. You'd think that the fodder would be the people that are cynical, like the coach.
Well, I think he's fodder too.
Oh, yeah, they're all fodder except for the main people, yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that was a fun little discussion about Yellowjackets. Danny and I are actually going to go record another episode right now. We are on our path to Evil Dead Rise, and today we're going to be talking about The Hole in the Ground, which is made by the Evil Dead Rise director Lee Cronin. So we're going to go record that. But thank you so much for everyone that commented on this episode. We'll make sure we get back to you guys, and we'll be back next Saturday to talk some Yellowjackets.